The laws of selling, Chapter 22. A person cannot transfer ownership over an article that has not yet come into existence. This applies with regard to a sale, with regard to a present, or with regard to the disposition of an oral will. What is implied? If a person states, "What my field will produce is sold to you, what this tree will grow is given to you, give so and so the offspring that this animal bears," the recipient does not acquire anything. Similar principles apply in all analogous situations. 2. When a person sells the fruit of a date palm to a colleague, and may retract even after the fruits of the date palm have already come into existence. If the purchaser harvests the fruits, they are not expropriated from him. If either of them retract, he is not required to receive the adjuration mishapara. 3. When, however, a person sells produce at the market price, although the seller was not in possession of the type of produce, the seller is obligated to purchase the amount of produce he pledged and give it to the purchaser. If he retracts, he must receive mishapara. 4. The following is applied when a person sells produce at the market price, promising to give for a seller, even if the grain was in stocks. The transaction is completed. If he retracts, the seller is liable to receive mishapara, provided either of the following stipulations is met: A. The seller shows the purchaser that he possesses grain in the stores, or B. The purchaser tells the seller in the marketplace, "I am relying on you." If the purchaser did not tell the seller, "I am relying on you," the seller does not consider this to be a firm agreement, and he is not required to get a mishapara if he retracts. For he says to himself, perhaps the purchaser also made such agreement with another individual. He does not actually require this wheat. 5. An entity that is not in possession of the seller cannot be acquired. It is like an entity that has not yet come into existence. What is implied? When the seller says, "When I will inherit my father," is sold to you. What my net will bring up from the sea is sold to you. Or when I purchase this field, it is sold to you. The purchaser does not acquire anything. Similar principles apply in all analogous situations. 6. When a person was on his deathbed and their heir desired to sell some of the dying person's property to spend the money for the sake of the burial, the sages ordained that if the heir says, "What I will inherit from my father today is sold to you," the sale is binding. The rationale is that since the son is poor, if he is forced to wait until his father dies to sell the property, the corpse will remain unburied and be disgraced. Similarly, provisions are made for a poor fisherman who has nothing to eat. If he says, "What my net will bring in today from the sea is sold to you," the sale is binding. This was ordained to provide for his livelihood. 7. The person sold property belonging to his father during his father's lifetime, but the son died in his father's lifetime. The son's son may expropriate the property from the purchaser. The rationale is that the father sold something that did not enter into his domain. Thus, the property remained in the domain of his grandfather, and the grandson inherited the estate of his grandfather. Similar principles apply in analogous situations. 8. The following rules apply when a person gives a colleague landed property as a present, and together with it gave him 100 dinarim through Kinyan Agaf. If the dinarim existed in his domain at the time he gave the present, when the recipient acquired the field, he also acquired the dinarim. Whoever the giver does not have a dinar, we are not obligated to give the recipient 100 dinarim until the recipient brings proof that the giver possessed dinarim at the time the recipient acquired the present. Same principles apply to other movable property that the person desires to transfer together with the landed property through a Kinyan Agaf. If the movable property is not in the domain of the seller or the giver at the time the recipient acquires the present, he does not acquire it, for a person may not transfer ownership over an article that is not in his domain. 9. When a person has entrusted an object to a colleague for safekeeping, he may transfer ownership over either through a sale or through a gift. The rationale is that an entrusted object is the domain of the owner. We operate under the presumption that the entrusted object continues to exist. However, the person to whom the article was entrusted denies receiving it, the owner may not transfer ownership of it. It is as if the article were lost. It is not in his domain. Different rules apply with regard to a loan. Since the loan is given with the intent that it be spent, it cannot be transferred except to a maimad shloshtam, a convention that is not based on a motivating reason, as we have explained. If the loan was supported by a promissory note, the creditor may transfer ownership of the promissory note with written authorization and the transfer of the note. If there is an entity that can be transferred to which one can acquire the encumbrance it contains. 10. Just as a person may not transfer ownership of an article that has not yet come into existence, so he may not transfer ownership of an article to someone who has not yet come into existence, even if it is considered to be someone who has not yet come into existence. And thus, when a person wishes to endow a fetus with an article, the transaction is not binding for whoever the fetus is a person's son. The transaction is binding. The rationale is that a person feels great closeness to his son. 11. Whenever a person tells his wife, "I will give my property to the children that you will bear," the children do not acquire anything, since the woman was not pregnant at the time the present was given. The children have not yet reached a stage that which it could be said that a person feels great closeness for them. 12. When a person desires to transfer ownership of property to an animal, the transfer is not effective at all. If a person attempts to transfer part of his property to an animal or to a person who did not exist, and afterwards told a colleague, "Acquire a share of my property as this animal does," or as this fetus does, the colleague does not acquire anything. If he tells him, "You and this animal shall acquire my property," or "You and this fetus," the person acquires half of the property. 13. A person cannot transfer ownership neither through a sale to a present unless an object over an object unless it is substance. If it has no substance, ownership of it cannot be transferred. 14. What is implied? A person cannot transfer ownership over the fragrance of an apple, the taste of honey, the color of crystal, or the like. Therefore, when a person desires to transfer ownership of the right to partake of the fruits of a date palm or do well in his home, the recipient does not acquire anything. For the transaction to be effective, the owner must transfer the house itself for the sake of dwelling in it, or the tree itself for the purpose of eating its fruits, as will be explained. 15. The laws applying to transactions involving property consecrated to the temple, the poor, the vows are not the same as those involving ordinary people. The person says, "All the offspring of my animal will be consecrated to the temple treasury, will be forbidden to me, or will be given to charity," although the offspring does not become consecrated because it does not yet exist. The person making the statement is obligated to keep his word. As it says, he must act according to his statements that he utters. 16. Since the self person on his deathbed says, "Whatever this tree produces shall be given to the poor," or "The rent from this house shall be given to the poor acquire these objects. 17. There are Gainim who differ with this principle and hold the poor acquire only in a similar manner that of an ordinary person. Therefore, they do not require an entity that has not yet come into existence. I do not accept these principles in ourselves. That a person is not commanded to transfer ownership of the property. He is, however, commanded to fulfill his pledges to charity or to consecrate property as he is commanded to fulfill other vows, as we explained in Hilchis Erchen. Chapter 23. A person can transfer ownership over a property itself with regard to the produce it yields. This applies with regard to a sale, with regard to a present, or with regard to an oral will. This is not considered to be transferring ownership of an entity that has not come into existence. For the article itself exists, and the person is transferring ownership over its produce. To what can a matter be compared? To a person who rents a house or a field to a colleague, in which instance he did not transfer ownership over the property in its entirety, but rather merely the right to derive benefit from it too. What is implied? A person sold or gave away a field with regard to its produce for a limited time or for the entire lifetime of the seller or of the purchaser. Similar rules apply to the person who sells or gives away a tree for its fruit, a sheep for its shearings, an animal or a maidservant for her offspring, or a servant for his work. In all such instances, the sale of the present is binding. 3. There is an unresolved question if the sale is binding when a person sells a servant with regard to his fine, i.e., whether the fine which is imposed if the servant is gored by an ox killed should be given to the purchaser or not. Therefore, the purchaser does not require the money. If he seizes it from the servant's owner, it is not expropriated from him. 4. When a person sells a tree to one person and its fruit to another, when making the first sale, he did not leave over the rights to the fruit. Therefore, the second purchaser does not acquire anything. If, however, the person sells a tree and leaves its fruit to himself, it is considered as if he retained the branches, the place where the fruit grows, even if he did not explicitly say so. The rationale is when a person retains property for himself, he acts generously. 5. When a person sells landed property for a specific time, the sale is binding. The person may use the body of the land as he desires and derive benefit from it throughout the duration of the sale. At the end of the specified time period, the property returns to its original owner. 6. What is the difference between a person who sells landed property for a specific time, one who transfers ownership of it with regard to its produce? A person who purchases it with land with regard to its produce may not change the form of the land. He may not build, nor may he destroy. When by contrast, a person purchases land for a specific time, he may build and destroy. During that specific time, he may act in the same manner as does one who purchases the land forever. What is the difference? 7. What is the difference between a person who sells a field with regard to its produce it yields and a person who sells a colleague the produce of a particular field? When a person sells the produce of a particular field, the purchaser has no right to use this field at all. He is forbidden even to enter except to take out his produce. The owner of a field by contrast may do whatever he desires within. When by contrast a person sells a field with regard to the produce it yields, the owner of the field may not enter the field without the consent of the purchaser, and the purchaser may not use the field as he desires. 8. What is the difference between a person who purchases the field with regard to the produce it yields, a person who rents the field from a colleague? A person who purchases the field with regard to the produce it yields may plant trees, seeds within it whenever he desires to leave it. Whatever he desires, or leave it fallow. A renter does not have this right, as will be explained with regard to rentals. A renter does not have the right to sublet the property. One who buys the property may, however, sell the rights he purchased to another person. 9. When a person sells the benefit to be obtained from a dovecote or the benefit to be obtained from a beehive to a colleague, the sale is binding. He is not considered to sold, and that does not come into existence, for he is not selling the doves that will be born or the honey that will be produced in the beehive. Instead, he is selling the dovecote with regard to the benefit it produces and the beehive for its honey. The seller can be compared to a person who rents a stream of water to a colleague, which instantly to be derived benefit from everything he catches within. Similarly, when a person sells a dovecote with regard to its benefit, he is as if he's selling the tree with regard to its fruit. And the law applying to both of them are like those applying to a person who rents a house. We explain halacha 1. Such a person may derive all possible benefits to the property. Similar laws apply in analogous situations. 10. The owner of the dovecote does not acquire the eggs and the fledglings in the dovecote until they fly. There's a decree enacted as a safeguard to the prohibition: do not take the mother with the young. Therefore, a person who wants to transfer the ownership of the eggs or these fledglings to a colleague, he should wrap on the dovecote so that the mothers will fly away, lifting themselves off the ground. He should then transfer the ownership of the dovecote to his colleague via kinei chalifin, by virtue of a transfer of landed property or via another means of acquiring movable property. 11. When a person purchases the benefit to be derived from a dovecote from a colleague, he is not entitled to take all the fledglings that will be born from the time of the purchase onward. If he did that, the mothers would fly away. He would destroy the dovecote entirely. Instead, he should leave enough of the fledglings so the dovecote will remain populated. 12. How many fledglings must he leave? If there were mother dove and female fledglings at the time he sold a benefit from the dovecote, he should leave the first pair of offspring that the mothers will bear, so the mothers will be able to establish rapport with the first pair and the female fledglings that were with them from the time of the sale. He should also leave 2 pairs of fledglings from those that the daughter who were in the dovecote at the time of the sale bear, so that the daughters will be able to establish rapport with these 2 pair that they bore. Whatever offsprings are born after the first 2 pair from the daughters and the first pair of the mother belonging to the purchaser. 13. When a person purchases for the benefit to be gained from a beehive from a colleague, he may take 3 swarms of bees, one after the other. After that, he should take a swarm and leave a swarm to populate the beehive. 14. When a person purchases blocks of a beehive from a colleague, he should leave at least 2 blocks in the beehive so that the bees do not fly away and abandon the hive. 15. When a person purchases olive trees from a colleague, cut down his lumber, he must leave 2 fistfuls of the tree above the ground before cutting. If he purchases a wild fig tree that is never cut down, he must leave 3 handbreadths before cutting. If he purchases a wild fig tree that was cut down previously, he must leave 2 handbreadths. For other trees, 1 handbreadth must be left before cutting. For reeds and vines, he must leave the lowest knot above the ground. With regard to palm trees and cedar trees, the purchaser should dig out its roots, for it will not grow again. Chapter 24. When a person saw 3 trees within his field, even 3 small, newly planted trees, or 3 growths of 1 tree, the purchaser also requires land necessary to nurture them. Even if the trees dry up or are chopped down, he still owns the land necessary to nurture them. The purchaser also requires all the trees between them. 2. How much land is necessary to nurture them? The land beneath them, between them, and beyond them, in which a person picking fruit can stand together with his basket. The place in which a person picking fruit can stand together with his basket, may not be sown by either the buyer or the seller unless the other one agrees. 3. When does the vow apply? When 3 trees to be purchased are positioned like the 3 feet of a range on which a pot is placed, i.e. 2 parallel to each other, and a third equidistant between them, but not on the line connecting them. Basically a triangle. Must be at least 4 cubits between each tree and no more than 16 cubits. 4. From where does one measure? From the wide portion of the trunk of the tree. In the following situations, by contrast, the purchaser does not acquire the land. The trees were not standing in a position, they were closer together than 4 cubits or more distant than 16 cubits. He purchased one after the other, be sold by him 2 trees in the midst of his field, and the third on the boundary line. The purchaser bought 2 trees in one person's field, and one in a field belonging to a colleague, or a cistern, in an irrigation ditch, or the public domain was interposed between the purchaser's 3 trees. Therefore, the purchaser does not acquire the trees between the trees he purchased. If his trees dry up or are cut down, he has no further rights. 5. The following was applied whenever a person purchases 3 trees and therefore acquires land. If the trees grow and a new branch emerges outward from the trunk, it should be cut off, so as not to limit the passage of the owner of the field. All the twigs and small branches that emerge from the trees, even those that emerge from the roots, belong to the owner of the trees, for he has acquired the land. 6. When a person purchases 2 trees in a field belonging to a colleague, the purchaser does not acquire any land. Therefore, if one of his trees dies or was cut down, he has no further right to land. If 2 trees grow and produce twigs and small branches, they should be cut off, lest they grow into the earth and appear as the 3rd tree. Then the purchaser would tell the seller, "You have sold me 3 trees, and I have the right to the land." 7. The following laws apply to all the branches that the owner of the trees trims from them. Any branches that grow from the portion of the trunk that sees the sun belong to the owner of the trees. The branches that grow from the roots and do not see the sun belong to the owner of the field. With regard to palm trees, the owner of the tree does not acquire any of the branches, for they do not grow from the trunk. 8. When a person sells land or property but retains the right to the trees, he also retains possession of half of the land. For if he did not retain possession of the land, the purchaser would tell him, "Uproot your trees." Similarly, if he retains the right to 2 trees, he also retains possession of the land appropriate for them. For if he did not retain possession of the land, the purchaser would tell him, "Uproot your trees." Now, when a person sells trees, he retains possession of the land. The owner of the tree requires possession of the land necessary for them, as we have explained. If a person sold the land to one person and the trees to another, and the purchaser of the trees manifested his ownership over the trees, and the purchaser of the land manifested his ownership over the land, but the trees requires the trees and half the land, while the purchaser requires of the land only acquires half the land. 10. When the brothers divide an inheritance, one taking an orchard and one taking a field of grain, the owner of the orchard receives 4 cubits in the field of grain next to the orchard. He is granted this land because we assume they divided the land with this stipulation in mind. If it need not be stated explicitly because it is something that is well known. 11. The following laws apply when a person sells a field containing date palms to a colleague and specifies that he is selling him the field with the exception of one specific tree. If it is valuable and high quality tree, we assume they retain ownership of that one date palm alone. The remainder belongs to the purchaser. If the date palm that he has specified that he was retaining is inferior, we assume that he retained ownership over the others, and the purchaser does not acquire any of the date palms at all. 12. The following laws apply when a person sells a field to a colleague and tells him that he's selling it to him with the exception of the trees. If it contains only date palms, the seller retains ownership over the date palms. If it contains only vines, the seller retains ownership over the vines. Similar law applies if it contains only one other type of tree. If the field contains vines and date palms, the seller retains ownership over the vines alone. If it contains other trees and vines, the seller retains ownership over the other trees alone. Similarly, if it contains other trees and date palms, he retains ownership of the other trees alone. The rash sells that whoever sells generously. If the seller retains ownership over the date palms, he retains ownership only over those date palms that are tall that must send by means of a rope. The others belong to the purchaser. If he retains ownership of the trees, he retains ownership only over those trees that will not be bent over by yoke. Those that can be bent over by yoke belong to the purchaser and are considered part of the field. 13. The following was applied when a person tells a colleague, "I'm selling you the land and date palms," even if there are no date palms to land that he was intending to sell. If he desires to transfer ownership of the 2 other date palms, the transaction is binding. The purchaser does not have the option of saying, "I'm purchasing only the land that has date palms growing in it." If one of the seller tells him, "I am selling the land with date palms," the sale is binding only when there are at least 2 date palms on the land. If not, it's considered a transaction entered under false premises and is nullified. The seller to the purchaser, "I am selling you the land for date palms." It need not have date palms. This expression indicates merely that the land is fit to grow date palms. 14. When a person sells an orchard to a colleague, he must acquire the date palms, the dates, and the palm branches, although the purchaser requires all these entities, even when they are not explicitly mentioned in the deed of the sale. Mentioning them makes the wording of the document articulate. Similarly, when a person sells land or property to a colleague, he must write, "I have not retained ownership over anything in this sale," to prevent judgments and claims from arising. 15. The following apply when a person sells a house to a colleague, even though he writes in the deed of the sale, "I have transferred ownership of its depths and its heights." It's right to require the ground of the earth's depth, the height of the sky. For the heights of the depths of the property are not transferred when no specifications is made. If he said that he was transferring ownership of the heights and depths, the purchaser would acquire the height, i.e. the atmosphere alone, and the depths was under the ground. He does not acquire what is in their midst. When, however, he writes, from the ground of the earth's depth to the heights of the sky, requires a water receptacle and a cistern that are in the midst of the earth, and the paths that are in between the ceiling and the top of the building. 6. When a person sells a home on the condition the upper story remains his, he retains possession of that portion of the building. If he desires to extend projections from it, he has the right. If it falls, he may rebuild it, and if there was a third story built on top of the second, and it fell, he desires to rebuild it, he may build it as if it was before it fell. 17. Although a person sells his grave, the path to the grave, the place where the funeral procession stands, in the honor of the party, or the place where eulogies are recited, the family may come and bury the deceased there, or perform any of the other rites. Against the will of the purchaser, this privilege was granted, lest the failure reduce or blemish the honor of the family. They must pay the purchaser for the grave in which the deceased was buried. This position was granted, even though it was not stated explicitly in the original deed of sale.